But we start off with the biggest story of the weekend. Jay Woodcroft out as Edmonton Oilers head coach. Kris Knoblauch in as Edmonton Oilers head coach. Where do we start with this one? And also, why did the Oilers fire Jay Woodcroft after a win, and instead of just doing it after he lost to San Jose, the worst team in the league?
I'm sympathetic on that one. I saw a lot of sort of commentary on this. I mean, they just hired someone who was working for another franchise's AHL team. And just the logistics of being in Seattle and Kris Knoblauch coaching a team based in Hartford, and what has to happen in terms of getting permission from, in this case, the Rangers, that's the affiliate of the Rangers, the Hartford team. Then you have to negotiate a contract with them, and then you have to bring them in, physically get them across the country or the continent. I can understand why that took more than just 10 hours. So I think that's why it happened. I mean, clearly the wheels were in motion, but before the game in Seattle, I think, to make that coaching change, but there was logistical hurdles there. As for the decision itself, I mean, what a abject failure this season has been for the Oilers. I mean, I think to make a change like this soon into the year is really an admission of, things not working there for a team that a lot of us, including me on this show, had pegged as a Stanley Cup contender. And, what's funny is there's still enough season left, is that could still manifest itself. That could still happen. But this group stumbled badly out of the gates. I think that there's real questions to be asked about who's in charge and what the direction is. And are there too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak? I mean, I think from a process standpoint, this looks clumsy. But with all that being said, I know a lot of people that think extremely highly of Kris Knoblauch, and so, well, you hate that you're here on November 12th, November 13th, making a coaching change that soon into a season where, people had branded you as one of the best teams in the league. You might not like how it all looks. Like, I think optically it was not sort of a great view of the way things function in Edmonton. You might end up in the right place, after all of that. And, this is a coach, I've been hearing about Julian at least 3 or 4 years. Like, he's one of the, he's a name to watch. He's one of the next ones. He's, got a lot of promise about him, and might have took a little bit longer than I would have guessed for Kris Knoblauch to get this kind of chance. But, from everything I've heard, just an extremely impressive guy. And the Oilers, the urgency to win is pretty evident in terms of making a call like this. So we'll sit back and watch what happens now. But, very, very interesting first month in Edmonton.
Oh, that is for sure. Also, we would be we have to mention the obvious with Kris Knoblauch too. I'm sure his qualifications are great, and he seems like he's doing great work in Hartford. He also coached Connor McDavid with the Erie Otters in junior. Like, that's a very obvious connection between the two men.
Yep, and Connor Brown and Travis Dermott and a bunch of other former clients of Jeff Jackson when he was an agent, and now Jeff Jackson is the president of the Oilers. So, I don't think it's very difficult or hard for us to connect a lot of dots about how this would come up. For those that don't know much about Kris Knoblauch, he won a WHL title as a head coach in Kootenay, an OHL title as a head coach in Erie, and then moved to had a couple seasons as a Flyers assistant under Dave Haxtell, and then has been these last 5 years in the AHL with Hartford. So pretty long run of coaching success, I would say, and he's still a young coach. He's in his early 40s, so he's won a lot of hockey games, and as you mentioned, has that connection to McDavid specifically. And this is now the 5th head coach of the McDavid Draisaitl era, if we'll call it that, in Edmonton. And could be the last one. I'm not predicting the end of that era, but this is one that they really hope to get right. Jay Woodcroft, for a long time, I mean, we should mention, he won a ton of games as Oilers head coach. 640 winning percentage, I think so, something like that. For a long time, he was thought to be the answer, and then that quickly soured. And so, I think what most of us look at this, you just wonder how much of the Oilers' issues to start the season are coaching related. I mean,
that was my next question.
You know what I mean? Like, you have goalies that are not playing very well, and ultimately we saw Jack Campbell sent to the AHL with a $5 million contract. You have shooters that are shooting abysmally. And, some of these things, depending how you view them, we're probably going to regress to the mean or move to a point where, probably the Oilers are going to score more. And, you've got an injured star and Connor McDavid clearly not at 100%. A lot of things have sort of come together to put the Oilers in the position they are with a 3-9-1 start. But, I just don't know how much of it's coaching. I suppose what this tells us, though, is how urgent the situation is for the organization and how badly they can't risk this season, going in the wrong direction. And, maybe that win with Jay Woodcroft behind the bench in Seattle will start something, right? I mean, a 4-1 win on the road. They get a lead in the first period and they really shut things down. Don't give up many shots in that game to the Kraken. Win the way a team that's supposed to be dominant should win. And, maybe that is the start of something here, and this coaching change will work. But, it all just, it does reek of a certain desperation, I guess. And as I say, I mean, this has been a failure at all levels of the Oilers organization to get to a point where you're making that decision.
One more thing on the Oilers here. So we have Connor McDavid on a team where his agent has become the CEO of hockey operations, and now he gets his former junior coach as the head coach. I'm not saying he got that, but this is the situation that we're in with the team right now. But all that to say, like, you have these pieces in place. Does it sort of not feel like this team having guys that are very familiar to Connor McDavid, like there's a long play at this in order to appease him, and I guess maybe to go one step further, because I forget who made that comparison online, but it feels very like LeBron James-esque, where he's this centerpiece on this team. You're doing everything you can to appease him. You get all these people around him, whether in the front office or on the court, who are around that he likes, that are going to ensure, okay, he's going to stay in this franchise for a while. Like we saw that a lot in Cleveland as an example. Is that a fair comparison? Are we jumping the shark on this one? What do you make of the pieces in play that are surrounding McDavid that have those connections now?
Well, I think it just makes sense, honestly. I mean, you have a singular talent like Connor McDavid. I'll give you, I was looking at there's a site called Adjusted Hockey. I was looking at it because it's the Hall of Fame induction weekend. And on Adjusted Hockey, they have basically the gentleman that's put that together. He ranks players all time. Connor McDavid is like 11th or 12th among all-time forwards in terms of his Hall of Fame eligibility. Like if he never plays another game, the guy's not even 30. When you have a player like that, I don't think that we should read into it that he's hard to please or that he's demanded all this, because I don't think that that's the read that I have on the situation. But I do think if you have that person, I mean, you're going to want to do everything you can to get the most out of them, because that's probably the path for success for the team too, right? And for the organization. And so, I don't think Connor McDavid, made this coaching change, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I think sometimes that sort of stuff does happen in the NBA a little bit more. I think it's more from the CEO's level there. Jeff Jackson, saw a situation where he thought a move needed to be made, and obviously knows Connor so well, understands, the relationship, and would knows Kris Knoblauch well too, because he has had so many clients over the years play for Knoblauch, including McDavid. So, I think it's more coming from the top levels of the organization. But of course, I think it's about putting McDavid in the best position possible. That includes finding teammates that he likes. I mean, I know it hasn't worked out at all to start this year, but they did sign Connor Brown in the offseason, who played in Erie with Connor McDavid, was coming off a knee injury, and he's had a tough start to the year. But you've seen that consistent pattern, and I do think it's not a bad way to operate. I don't think it's causing the Oilers problems. Really, to me, I just wonder if they've made good enough decisions down the roster to warrant that contender status that we've all anointed them. And we're gonna have to see now. I think a coaching change does sometimes spark something in a team and clearly gets everyone's attention for a period of time here. And as I say, it's one of these weird ones where I actually can't criticize where they got to, because I don't think it's a bad decision. to have Kris Knoblauch as their head coach, but it doesn't feel right the way the process played out to get there.
Actually, another thing we should get to as well is the fact that the press conference went the way that it did, where I'm sure you caught this too, but it felt kind of weird. I mean, maybe I'm reading into it wrong, but it seemed as if Ken Holland was trying to make the point that he did discuss this with veterans, and then Jeff Jackson made it seem as if there wasn't that consultation. Did you pick up on that?
I saw the clip. I think the way I viewed that is Ken Holland basically said that he's talking to his players about like basically taking information in about what's going on, what's going wrong with the team. I would presume that would be how's the coaching situation. I think, but then Jeff Jackson, I thought he was just sort of clarifying to say like Connor McDavid didn't fire Jay Woodcroft. That was how I read it. But I mean, look, it's a weird situation. Ken Holland's a GM on the final year of his contract, not likely to be back. I think, he's pretty close to retirement at this point, as we all expected. When he signed a 5-year deal to go to Edmonton, it was kind of viewed as his last hurrah as a GM. You've brought in Jeff Jackson just this last summer, who's now, I guess, he's the boss on the hierarchy. I think there is a question in general of leadership. Do you know what I mean? About who's really who's manning the controls here, who's got the most influence, and who's making these types of decisions. So I think it's fair to wonder if everyone's on the same page entirely. And maybe that kind of moment in the press conference highlighted that fact.